Lifestyle Pirates with Big J and Adriano.
Right, welcome along to Lifestyle Pirates. We are here today with Coach Jemma. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Look, I'm quite nervous because the last time I saw you, you were kicking everybody's ass and making us do burpees and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that we're inside, not in a gym. What's been going on in your world? How have you been keeping busy?
I've been good. Obviously, with the whole COVID situation, the gym's closed. The gym's actually closed down on my birthday, so that was a very memorable birthday for me. I was also in quarantine because one of the fighters unfortunately tested positive. So gym closed and I was in quarantine. So definitely a memorable birthday. But I have kept busy. I'm actually studying a diploma of counselling at the moment.
Right, okay.
Give me something to do. I think what I wanted to focus on with this whole COVID situation is that I know a lot of people were very disappointed that the gyms closed, but I know that the mental health aspect was going to fall behind as well. So something that will not only help me, but give me a chance to help others as well. So, yeah.
So, I mean, to touch on that then, so how has it helped you from a, given that your job is at a gym?
Yeah.
How has it kind of helped you from a...
I mean, I went from doing 40 plus hours a week to, 30 classes to having hundreds of fighters and coaches and everything on a daily basis. Like I worked 24 hours, 7 days a week to nothing.
Yeah.
So my own mental health kind of struggled a little bit because I went from nonstop to completely stopping. So to have something to throw myself into mentally, it picked me up from probably an ongoing, probably dangerous thing where I wanted to sit in bed. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to do anything because I didn't have any motivation or I didn't actually have something that I had to do that day.
Yeah.
So I made the choice that I was like, no, I'm not going to do it anymore, and signed up, and I'm about 2 months into it now. So yeah.
Okay.
So you mentioned that exercise is the catalyst for sort of positive change.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
I think to get up and get active, especially when you're feeling mentally drained, is probably the best thing. Like I know a lot of people focus on, going to doctors and getting medicated and stuff like that, but I think you need to be able to help yourself before you get to that level. I know that there would probably be some situations where medication and things like that is a must, but I think it's a very quick and easy fix.
Yeah.
That's not actually
It's
fixing the problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you can kind of build your own mental strength without having to have someone give you that, I think you got to help yourself.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
that's why I focus a lot on getting up, getting active and pushing past it, because no one's ever regretted a workout, regardless if it's a 20-minute walk or,
That's true.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I beg to differ. When you get that 2 day burn, you're like, oh my goodness.
It's a good burn though.
It is a good burn. Look, and I do miss it. I'm looking forward to the gym's actually open this weekend. Very excited to go back next week.
Yeah, I just came from there.
Yeah, of course you did. So our paths have obviously crossed in that boxing world.
Yes.
With corporate fighter. What got you into boxing?
So I started boxing just before I turned 16. I grew up in a family that was very much boxing orientated. Like a lot of families are footy families. My family was a boxing family. So like rather than, photos of like pop stars on my walls, I had photos of Muhammad Ali. Like I was just born and bred into a boxing family. And my mum shares the same birthday as Muhammad Ali. So
nice. Oh, wow.
yeah, so it was in my blood before I even had a choice to.
Yeah.
And my younger brother was boxing at the time, and we had just relocated to a new town in Western Australia, and I was walking home from school one day and I got grabbed from behind and I had my bag stolen and I got absolutely just beaten up and left on the side of the road. Yeah. So I remember coming to and just hearing cars go past me. I got up and I walked home and got all the way home and saw my mum out the front hosing down the garden, and I just broke down and I was like, I was just a mess, and ended up spending a couple of days in hospital because I had a lot of swelling around my head, and came home and I didn't want to leave the house.
It's a big beating.
It's a
Wow.
big beating. Like I still to this day don't know who did it. I was just taken from behind, had all my stuff taken, my backpack taken, everything.
So this is when you were 16?
just before I turned 16, I was probably about 15.
And that was the catalyst for you getting into boxing?
Yeah, well, it was my brother was at the gym at the time, and he's 2 years younger than I was. And after a few weeks of being at home, and he was just like, "Why don't you just come down the gym?" And I was like, ummed and ahed about it, and I was like, "Actually, yeah, no, I want to." And I got into the gym, and one of the first things the coaches said to me is like, "Oh, I don't train girls."
Oh, really?
the assistant coach is away, but when he comes back, he'll be your coach. So I was like, oh, right, no worries, challenge accepted. And
I can imagine that would have just driven you as well.
Yeah, so I don't think if my brother was there, I don't think that I probably would have felt very welcome in coming back, or I probably would have stayed. I probably would have walked out at that stage. But having my younger brother there, I was kind of like, no, actually, I want to stick this out. I want to do this with him. And I was very lucky that this coach, his name was Brian, he was one of the most loveliest men that I've ever met. And he took me under his wing, and within 12 months, he sat me down and he was like, "I want you to have your first fight." And it went from there. So I was about 16, and I believe the lady that I fought was about 27.
Wow. Did you win?
I did. I won 12 points to 1.
Nice one.
So that was under the old scoring system before it changed. Yeah. So I do remember in that fight, though, I do remember someone screaming out for me to kick her in the head. So you don't remember a lot from your first fight, as you probably remember.
Was it kickboxing or boxing?
Boxing.
Oh, okay.
Boxing. But
You're not allowed to kick, are you?
No, you can't.
So.
But we were the only female fight on the card, so I guess they felt like they needed to,
put them in a body bag, yeah.
Pretty much. So I was like, right. And yeah, it was all a blur. I remember sitting down in the corner after the first round and my coach telling me to relax. I think I pretty much sprinted back to the corner. I was that full of adrenaline. Yeah. And I won 12 points to 1. And then from then on, it was always a joke in the gym. You're like, oh, you at least, what was that 1 point about? So, but and it went from there. I was hooked after that.
Yeah. So you said the old scoring system. So what was that?
So there was an old scoring system. It changed back in 2011, I believe. And it used to be that 4 to 5 coaches, depending on the level of competition, would watch and hold a control panel with a red and a blue button. And it took them, a second within seeing a scoring punch to press the button that represented the fighter that landed the punch for it to calculate. So they changed that because it's a very outdated scoring system. So now
2 big buttons.
Yeah, 2 big buttons, a red and a blue button. So if you're distracted for a second, you could miss quite a lot. Or if you're blinded by, the angle that you're sitting in the ring, you could miss scoring punches, which can cost someone a fight, which then can cost them a spot on a national team or
So what was that 1 point?
So it was 1 point. To this day, I don't remember it. I still have it on DVD, which is, I know that's
Can we get a copy of that?
You sure can. We can analyse it and find out where that 1 point was.
For those that are watching on YouTube, you'll have seen that 1 point right now.
So, yeah.
Wow, okay. So you're 12 months in, you won your first fight. Mm-hmm. Were you hooked? What was the point?
I think what kind of hooked me was I remember being driven back by my coach that night and him dropping me off in the driveway and being like, "See you, champ." And that was probably the first time my whole life that anyone's ever referred to me as a champ before, and I actually felt like one because I'd won that and I'd gone through so much to get to that point. So
that must have been amazing.
That feeling was probably the best that I felt in a very, very long time, and I wanted to chase that feeling again. So,
nice.
That's what hooked me.
So once it hooked you, like what changes in your mind? Because you're going to school at that stage and then you're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to bash people.
Well, at school, I was always known as the boxing girl. I was the boxing girl. So
it's a good reputation to have.
Yeah, it was no one ever picked on me in school after that.
I wonder why.
So, I mean, I loved the discipline of it all. Like I was in high school, I was year 11 and 12, and I would be at school all day and then head straight to the gym after it. And I think what kept it very fresh for me is that every time 12, 14 months after, I still had butterflies walking down the stairs to get into the gym, which was, I've tried a lot of other sports, water polo, netball, basketball, and that kind of feeling fell away after a little bit. I wasn't as excited to train, or I was excited to push myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fell in love with the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to that, when that attack happened, that assault happened, how's your mental health after that? Were you shook? Like, did it take you a while to grab back, jump back from that? Sorry,
I didn't want to leave the house. Like my brothers were out, playing with friends. My mum and dad would leave. My little sister was in kindergarten at that stage, and I didn't want to leave. All I wanted to do was sit at home and watch a movie, or like I didn't want to leave the house. Like I had no want or need to even go outside and sit in the sun. And I grew up, playing with my brothers every weekend, and you come home when the street lights are on, and I didn't even want to leave. Like I was scared. I had no self-confidence. I was like, if that can happen, me walking home from school, who knows what else can happen? And I was in a new town. I didn't know anybody, and I ended up transferring schools. So yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So what took you? Because you're originally from Melbourne.
Yes, born in Melbourne.
Yeah. So you went to Perth. What brought you to Sydney?
So I grew up in a little town in Western Australia called Mandurah, which is probably about an hour south of the city. When we moved there wasn't even a train line, and right now it's the end of the train line. So yeah, there
it's
wasn't
a terminating station.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
I mean, it is a beautiful town, but like I'm sure anyone from WA would tell you that it's very much a retirement state. There was a lot of drug use and things like that. It wasn't somewhere where I felt like I could prosper. And after being in a sport like boxing, where you can see the progression and you can feel it, and you have your eyes set on accomplishments and things like that, I just feel like I couldn't do it in Mandurah. So I decided to make the move to Sydney. I thought I needed to be out of my comfort zone to be able to grow. So I packed 2 suitcases and left.
Wow.
Yeah.
So out of all 3 of those cities, what's your favourite? And why?
I've got to say, I have a soft spot for Sydney now.
Take that, Melbourne.
Yeah. I love Melbourne, I do. But yeah, I've got a soft spot for Sydney now. I just think it's beautiful. I mean, I spent last weekend down on the Blue Mountains for the first time, and I think that's just really ignited the love again.
How was the traffic there? I heard
it was horrible.
Mental. I
was
saw
no
everyone
social
on
distancing
Facebook and social media
whatsoever.
at Blue Mountains. I don't know what happened. Did they send out like a massive marketing campaign or something?
I
Because
don't know.
everyone was in the Blue
we got
Mountains
to the
that
Three
weekend.
Sisters, and there was probably about 800 people. And I was like, okay, we've seen them. We can go now.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. The traffic was huge.
Yeah, I heard the traffic getting back.
Yeah.
Getting back to Sydney was
It was
mental.
bad. It was really bad. Yeah. So
Wow. Fair play. So let's get back to any other weekend tips you want?
Get away.
Yeah. Let's get back to kind of you and boxing, because you are quite a petite character. You're obviously very young. Kind of getting into it as well. Like you already said that your first fight, you were 16. The lady you fought was 27.
yeah.
How did that progression then continue? Yeah, because women in boxing is still very, I would say, in its infancy stage.
Yeah.
Over the last probably 10 years, right?
Definitely.
It's still very young. So we're talking you guys a long time ago. How was that?
I mean, I remember showing up for my first weigh-in. So I was 16. I'd never been for a weigh-in before, and for any fighter, a weigh-in's always a nervous thing, regardless if you know your own weight or not. There's always that kind of suspicion.
I always get nervous on the scales.
One at a time.
They're always broken.
And in amateur boxing, you don't really have much leniency in regards to your weigh-in. So in the morning, you have to be on weight or under. If you're over, you're not fighting. So I fought at 54 kilos. So I was like...
I've eaten more.
So I remember being there, and I remember one of the older coaches coming up to me and being like, "Oh, does your parents know you're here?"
What?
Yeah, he asked me if my parents knew I was here, and he said, "Shouldn't you be at home?" I was like,
Get the
yeah, pretty much. I didn't know what to say. I just kind of looked at blankly and walked off. And I remember weighing in and just having that euphoric feeling that any fighter would feel, knowing that you've weighed in and you've made weight. And I'm just, so from that aspect, I think even today, even though women's boxing has progressed, I definitely think there's still very much a bias in regards to females entering into a very male-dominated sport. I mean, up until about 10 years ago, it was still illegal for females to register as fighters in New South Wales. So
How long ago?
about 10 years ago, I think it's actually less than 10 years ago.
Wow, that close.
Yep. Females couldn't register as fighters or as boxers or I think any kind of combat sport in New South Wales. It was deemed illegal and they had to travel outside of the state to fight.
Yeah.
So, and then you think of that now that some of the best female boxers in Australia are actually based out of New South Wales.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's, it's amazing to see.
So I got to ask just about that weigh-in because I like the sort of theatrics behind it. Is the weigh-in, is that when they face each other and you're like looking at each other and you're like screaming at each other, go, you want to fight?
Not with amateur
like
boxing.
No,
with amateur boxing, it was in a very run-down old school ballroom in the outskirts of Perth. And
how romantic.
It was, it was me and one other female, so we pretty much had to avert our eyes for most of it because the boys had to stoop to get onto the scales to make weight. So
what? No.
It's like being in a boys' locker room. And now the girls.
A disco ball.
Yeah, well, pretty much there was a disco ball in the middle of the dance floor underneath the ring. So,
of course there was.
So, I mean, now a lot of it's changed. The females do have an opportunity to weigh in separately to the males. But back then, it was like being in a boys' locker room. If you didn't want to see, close your eyes.
Yeah.
there's a lot around.
Sorry, did I understand that? In no clothes?
No clothes. If they were in risk of being overweight even by 100 grams, then they could jump on the scales naked to weigh in.
Wow.
Shaving.
Pretty much. Well, there's actually
I need to cut weight, man.
There's actually a rule now in amateur boxing that all males have to be clean shaven to weigh in, so no facial hair whatsoever.
Oh, we had Luke Jackson on the podcast, and he was talking about sitting in a sauna.
I've seen people do that
hours.
with garbage bags. I've seen people in their cars with heaters on in garbage bags just to
sweat out a bit more, so you cut
so
weight.
They can get on the scales and weigh in. Like this is like all the stuff of amateur boxing. So these are like young kids, 15, 16, 17 years old.
That's abusive to your body. Yeah.
Exactly, and no one talks about it because it's what they're expected to do as amateur boxers.
Yeah.
So
do what you got to do.
I've seen it all. I've seen my brother was a boxer, and I've seen him sleep in garbage bags to try to sweat out while he was sleeping before he goes to weigh in the morning.
I've done that once when I was hungover.
Detox, a little bit different.
Far out.
So how many fights have you had?
I've had 24 fights as an amateur.
Okay.
Yeah.
And won all of those?
No. So I went 22 wins and 2 losses. I was actually quite lucky early on in my career that I was actually able to progress quite quickly. By my 5th fight, I was fighting for an Australian title, which is actually when I met Luke Jackson for the first time. So me and him fought at the same Australian titles in Tasmania, where he was the golden boy. It was his home state. So I've known Luke for quite a while.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And over what period of time are we talking?
So I stopped fighting when I was about 24 due to an injury. So in between then, which for a female in regards to 16 to 24, I probably could have had a few more fights, but given injuries and having to work full time, because you can't, amateur boxing doesn't pay the bills, so you got to be able to work full time. I probably would have been able to get a few more fights on my belt, but I know there's a lot of females that have been twice as long as I have, and they're in, the hundreds of fights now. So I guess given at the time that I entered into the sport, that's a pretty good record to have.
So do you have any knockouts?
I do actually. The first time I fought in New South Wales, I won by knockout in the 3rd round, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. I've had
what round?
In the 3rd, start of the 3rd, start of the 3rd, and I'll never forget it. So
why is that?
Yes, it's. I mean, that's what you visualize happening in your training, and on the bag, and like I was always taught to kind of visualize your training, and because eventually it eventuates, you got to kind of have that picture in your mind, and you aim for it as much as you're not in there to hurt the other person. It's still a sport, and that's what you're aiming to do. And I remember seeing it as clearly as day as where the shot was going to land, and as soon as it landed, I just watched her turn and just drop, and then the ref came over, and I was like, that's what I've been working for the longest time. And when it connects, it's like, again, that kind of, I've had that achievement now. As brutal as that sounds.
Whoa. Note to self. No bees after, yeah?
Well, that must seem quite conflicting. Again, because you just said, I don't want to hurt the person, but then you're visualising knocking them out. and then them going to the canvas. That must play with your mind quite a lot.
Definitely. I think boxing is very much a character revealing sport. I mean, I think me in general, I do very much feel like a very empathetic person, and I like to help people and be a shoulder for people to lean on. But when you get into the ring and that bell sounds, it's business. You're there to do a job, just like if you're playing any other sport. If you're playing football, you're there to score a touchdown or score a goal, regardless of who's in your way or who's on the other team. But I mean, the great thing about boxing is that you can fight someone how many numerous times, and at the end of it, you're still mates. Like some of the best people I've met in boxing are people that I've fought before, that I'm still friends with today. Like there's no bad blood once the fight's done.
So it's all in the ring.
It's all in the ring. It's in the ring. It stays in the ring.
Nice.
I mean, if you're the kind of person that takes that business outside of the ring, especially in amateur boxing, it's, you're not going to be someone that people are going to want to work alongside. And as much as boxing is a very much individual sport, it's a team, it's a family as well. So,
So all of that stuff on TV where you see these people hate each other, is that all bullshit?
It's to sell tickets. It really, unfortunately.
You're a marketer's dream.
Shattered.
How important is the visualization piece to get you through? And I mean, I sometimes do it in things going on outside of sport and in life. Yeah, how important is that?
I think it's so important. I mean, especially with boxing, as much as you have coaches and you have, gym mates and things like that, at the end of the day, it's you that gets in the ring. So you kind of have to have that mind frame and know what you're aiming for. If you switch off and you're just training because your coach tells you to, you're never going to really achieve anything. You're just going to set yourself limitations. So I think visualizing something keeps your own mental game strong. Yeah. No one can, keep your mental health strong apart from you. So visualization is key. It gets you up in the morning and, it gets you to training on those hard sessions. So,
that's a good lesson.
Factor. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
go on.
Thank you, Squire. So I've got to ask. I asked Luke, so I wanted to ask you. So backstage, fight's about to start. When do the nerves kick in? Do you get nerves? What's your walkout music? Tell me it all.
I mean, there's some times where I can be a bit nervous before a fight, and then there's other times where I think the more I progressed through, the more I became comfortable with knowing that I've done the hard yards and I know that I've done all the work to get there and I know I deserve the win. So I think it just comes with ring experience. I mean, I remember being that nervous, like trying to wrap my hands where I was just like, I felt like I was going to pass out.
Really?
And then there was other times where I was so ready and then the fighter wouldn't show up. So I mean, it's hard. It's
just go out there, shadow box.
Pretty much. And it's just like back in those days in amateur boxing, if your fighter didn't show up, you still had to get dressed up and enter the ring. Yeah. So it was just full on. So I've had a couple of those before where, and it's just, it's the most disheartening thing when you just prepare and you cut weight and you go through the training sessions and you miss out on fights with like nights with friends and
but that fighter would have been at the other weigh. It would have been at the weigh-in as well.
So that's happened to me one time when I fought a girl for a state title and I beat her, and then it was a fighter for the national team and she challenged me again. So I had a couple of weeks to prepare, and I actually had friends come over from Perth to watch. I missed out on an Eminem concert and everything, and got out to a bit of both actually. Couldn't have much M&Ms when you're making weight, and got all the way out to I think it was Emu Plains or something to weigh in. And back then I was like 17, 18. I didn't have a car, so it was public transport, and got all the way there and she didn't show up. So
Devo.
Yeah, pretty much. So
going back to my other question that you completely ignored. What's your walkout music?
Well, see, in amateur boxing you don't really get a choice to pick your song, but I do remember my first ever song, and any time I hear it on the radio I'm like, oh, that was my first fight song. It was the Final Countdown. I'll never forget it now. Ever.
What would yours be?
Blue 65, Eiffel 65. No, it's a total joke. I don't know, man. I don't have a walkout music.
We'll come back to that. So when you say that they didn't turn up, I mean, they get the venue wrong. Why didn't they turn up?
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't ever do that. I don't understand why anyone would, but Yeah, and I know it's happened to me. It's happened to a few other people before. Where
I think it's just nerves or
I think so, or maybe they haven't trained, or maybe they have an injury, or who knows what's going on. But I know there's a few people where they just haven't shown up.
did you hear from that fighter afterwards?
Never.
Never?
Never
Wow.
again.
So you don't even know why she didn't turn up?
Never.
That would bug me.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would kill me. I need
Yeah.
closure.
It did. I remember sitting there waiting for the weigh-in, and there's this like a time frame of which you're supposed to weigh in. And I remember everyone being like, "Oh, Gemma, I don't think she's going to show up. Don't think she's going to show up." I'm like, "Nah," sitting there like waiting, not eating because I knew I had to make weight. So
So after you
Yeah.
do make weight, you're allowed to eat as much as you want. The fight's the next day.
well,
Because you've got to be able to.
So the fight's on the day. So amateur boxers usually weigh in
How
the morning or
depleted
the
must you
night
be?
of, which is it's like I said, a lot of people don't talk about this about amateur boxing. You see the pros who get on the scales that are as skinny as anything, and then they get in the ring, 24, 48 hours later,
that's
and
what
they
I
look
thought. I thought it was-
replenished.
yeah.
Amateur boxing, you don't get that opportunity. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You'd almost pass out in the
I've
ring.
I've seen little kids at national weigh-ins, and like this is tournaments where you've got hundreds of boxers, little kids, 14, 15, about to pass out, waiting in the line.
That's not right.
Yeah. I've seen my brother almost pass out when he was, he would have been 15 maybe, waiting in line to pass out. Because, and not all coaches are like this, but some coaches are. They do like to chase, I've got a national gold medal boxer. So they might want to get their fighters to cut weight down, so they're going into a division that doesn't have that many boxers nominated, so they have a better chance.
Oh, okay.
And so I've seen a few
Hunters.
coaches
Yeah.
a few coaches like that, and then you get some absolute amazing coaches that would just be like, no, you train, you eat well, and that's the way you go in.
Yeah.
At. So a bit of a mix. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on about your injury. What happened?
So I was doing some pad work, and the punch was caught just on a weird angle, and I ended up breaking my wrist, which was
So not even actually in a
Hardy
fight.
punching this thing.
yeah. I was throwing a right hook, and the pad just caught it on a bit of an angle, and I just felt a snap.
Did you hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, stop
Yeah,
it.
and I was just like, oh, but I think most boxers, if you've been in that adrenaline state and you're in training, you don't feel it necessarily straight away until a little bit after, and then the pain starts to set in and the swelling starts. I think I actually ended up finishing the session, but we stopped throwing some on my right hand, and I remember getting home being like, my wrist doesn't look quite right, and heading in and then being like, yep, you broke it. And not only that, I fractured a bone in my wrist and tore a ligament as well. So I did quite a good job on it, and that injury's followed me for years now. I've actually done it in a total of 3 times now.
Same wrist.
Same wrist.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I kind of, after the 3rd time, I actually went bowling after the 3rd time and was like, yeah, it doesn't feel quite right. And I was like, yeah, I think that's me done now. Yeah, so
That would have been hard.
it was not fun. I think once you work towards something for so long, and when your body kind of gives out on you, you're kind of like, well, you're disappointed in yourself, and you grieve the loss. You definitely grieve the loss, and I think mentally I suffered a lot because I built my whole life off, boxing and competing and training, and a lot of my other life suffered because of it, because that's all I wanted to do. So when I wasn't able to do it anymore, I was like, oh, well, what do I do? Like, this was what I wanted to. Like, I had dreams of one day going to the Olympics when women's boxing was actually allowed. So
Well, that was what,
2012.
2012, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, was the first time women's
that was when
boxing.
I fought off for my first national, and I got a silver medal. But when women's boxing was first allowed, they didn't select many weights. They actually took weights off the males division. So it went 51, 60 and 75, and I was 54. So that goes my Olympic dream. And then they did the same thing with the Commonwealth Games, which is actually quite sad because they took weights off the men's divisions, which means then if you were one of the men in those weight, then your Olympic dream was over because they gave it to the girls. So
It's a bit stupid on both sides, isn't it?
I know a few of the male boxers that missed out on, Olympics and Commonwealths and then ended up turning pro. So and turning pro for me wasn't something that I ever really wanted to enter into.
So what's the difference between pro and Olympics? Or
So pro, you can obviously fight for prize money.
the other one's not for prize money?
No, for amateur boxing, you can't actually take any prize
So
money.
where do you get money from?
You don't.
Oh, that sounds
Yeah, I mean, you can
awesome.
get sponsored.
Yeah. So that's where you
and stuff
'cause
like
how are you
that.
supposed to live?
Well, that's the thing. That's why a lot of amateur boxers back when I was fighting, I was working
Hmm.
full time. I was in school full time. So, especially with women boxing, you may get an opportunity to step in for a fight at a week's notice. And you're like, I can't. I've got work. I can't. That's how I make money. So
Yeah.
there's been some times where I've not been able to take fights because of that.
Wow.
Yeah, not fun.
Sounds like women's boxing's got quite a long way to go.
Yeah. So why doesn't everyone go pro?
It has come a long way. It definitely has, but it's still. I still don't believe that it's still on the same par as the males.
Yeah.
It's definitely on its way though.
Yeah. Nice.
Do you think UFC's helped that?
Definitely. Just to have a strong female in the limelight like Ronda Rousey was amazing. It's inspiring as well. And she held herself very, very well. I think towards the end of her career, it kind of changed a little bit in regards to how she held herself. But to have a female in the limelight that definitely portrayed like sophistication the way that she did, and she was just I was a big fan.
Well, you spoke about it earlier when you said you obviously had posters of Muhammad Ali on the wall and
Yep.
stuff. So I can imagine, people when they want to get into something, you do need what does good, successful look like.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I can imagine for women, if you've got someone like Ronda Rousey and even people like yourself that have been on the journey and they're in the game, you just go, well, actually, that's what it looks like.
It's inspiring
so they've
to
got something
see.
to go for.
Yeah, definitely.
So speaking of inspiration, you are a massive Floyd Mayweather fan.
I am. I'm a huge Floyd fan.
Why is that?
I
Apart from the fact he's just got cool clothes.
Yeah, I've got
apparently.
really cool clothes. I mean, I remember like back as an amateur boxer, like I always, again, you visualize stuff, you watch fights and things like that. And as a lot of people know Floyd, they know him as a professional fighter, but he also had a very extensive amateur career. And his amateur career was just unbelievable. So I remember watching a lot of his amateur fights. And the reason why he turned pro is that he was fighting off for, I believe it was either an Olympic spot or an Olympic medal, and he got absolutely robbed and didn't have the opportunity to go. So I remember watching that, and I know what it's like when you're on the end of a wrong decision, and it's so disheartening to see him suffer that loss and turn it into one of the best professional careers. Like that's inspiring to see.
Definitely.
And he has copped a lot of criticism throughout his career, but a lot of people don't see a lot of the foundations and the charities and all that kind of stuff that he works through. And I'm a big fan, definitely.
I thought you were going to be rocking one of the hats today.
I've got to hang them up. I've got that many of them now. I'm like, which one today?
Do you collect the
yeah.
hats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love them. I love them. They're hard to actually, Jay gave me one.
Yeah.
So, yes, big fan. And they're hard to get over here.
Yeah.
That's because every time you go online, they're always sold out and
Expensive?
expensive. Yeah. I mean, and the shipping from the States to here alone is more than the hat. So, yeah, it's insane.
I got mine from Vegas.
Did you?
Yeah.
Nice.
In the mall in Vegas. What makes him so good?
I love his attitude as much as it's, very kind of show pony and stuff like that, but he backs it up. And I think in boxing, if you're to have that kind of personality, you kind of need, to back it up a little bit. And I think he has. And then he's entertaining to watch. Like you watch the fights, like people that aren't even boxing fans will be like, Floyd Mayweather's fighting, I'm going to watch the fight.
Yeah.
Like that's like you can't
about-
can't teach that.
Yeah. What about Tyson? Have you seen that latest clip of him when he's like, I don't
That
know, how old is he now? 52 or something like
insane.
that?
That is insane. He is a machine. And I'm a big Tyson fan as well. I don't think anyone who's into boxing
Yeah.
couldn't be a Tyson fan
Yeah.
because he's just like the OG. So to see him coming out of retirement and
Yeah.
they've announced that he's fighting Evander Holyfield,
Yeah.
which is like, given that, I'm 28, you would never have thought that in my time I would ever be able to watch a Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield
Yeah.
fight ever.
Pumped?
I'm so pumped. I mean, I was in New York back in October and I got to go watch the Triple G fight at Madison Square Garden. I think I cried the whole time. So
It's very emotional.
I was just like, I can't believe I'm here. So yeah, stuff like that. Like that's on the bucket list for any true boxing fan.
He's so fast, even for
He's
his
just
age, and like
and
you can see that
natural.
there's power behind those punches.
I mean,
if you get hit by
and
that guy, you're
he's-
not getting up.
No.
He's knocking out a generation.
No, exactly. And his story is so inspiring.
Yeah,
I
big
mean,
time.
if anyone's not read his autobiography, I definitely suggest reading it because he comes across so articulate. Because as much as his interviews, he's quite, just rough and tough around the edges. But when he writes, it's just, it's amazing to see. And stories of him, playing basketball with Prince and Eddie Murphy and, calling Muhammad Ali after his amateur fights and stuff like that. Like it's amazing. Like people don't have that history.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
So
Do you
you're a
think
big
that was
fan.
do you think that was the glory days of boxing, or was it still coming?
No, definitely. I mean, you see the fights now, in Vegas or Madison Square Garden, and very rarely will you see, people dress up for them. Back in those days, it was just like the height of the social calendar. Like the Mike Tyson fight is on, and you see people dressed with furs and all that kind of stuff. Like it was the place to be. Like I think boxing's kind of missed that little bit of sparkle. But it's still got sparkle for me and a lot of other people. But yeah,
You can tell you still love it, which is awesome.
I do.
So you kind of went from boxing, you got injured. Where did Coach Jemma appear? How did that come about?
So I was asked to take a few classes at Corporate Fighter, which is based in Sydney, just outside of the CBD, and I loved it, and it kind of reignited that love for me again. As much as I couldn't do it, like I couldn't even punch a bag for a very long time. Like I was always in casts or splints, or had my wrist wrapped up, and I missed it. And I remember what it was like being, a female in boxing or being a novice in boxing, and knowing now in hindsight what I wish I could have had in a coach. As much as my coach was amazing, there's still some things that you kind of need to adapt for certain people. So to be able to have the opportunity to do that and, sit down and talk to people about boxing, that it's not just a physical sport, it really is a mental sport as well. So to be able to kind of have an opportunity to do that, it just kind of reignited another love for me. And I ended up being asked to come on as the head coach. So I resigned from my job and started at the gym full time. And I've loved it.
What is Corporate Fighter?
So Corporate Fighter is a 12-week training program where we get first-time fighters. They come in and in 12 weeks' time they have their first amateur fight. So throughout the training program, they're also raising funds for charity. So we do try to focus very solely on mental health and raise funds for mental health. And throughout the program, try to have those, those hard to have conversations. And because I think, especially with boxing, I think Jay will agree that it brings those questions to the forefront. Like it really does when you are struggling and things like that, and to kind of give people a support system with people that are going through the journey with them. So yeah.
It's a big leveler going on that 12-week journey, because it doesn't matter, what you do for work, where you're from, how much money you earn, whether you're male or female, you kind of, you're in the group together from start to finish. And I remember the first time I got punched in the face, and I'm not an aggressive person, but I remember coming home and looking in the mirror and generally like questioning why I was doing it.
Yeah.
And then the black eye comes. And
Big
shiner. Mate, I did. I had a big shiner. And and again, you just go, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? Yeah, and it's like the Tyson quote: "Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face."
Yeah.
I'd never been punched in the face. Yeah, I probably had people that wanted to punch me in the face for many years, but when that landed, I was like, Jesus! And it was like the cartoon; it was right on the button.
Yep.
Saw stars, the full works. But yeah, it was amazing. It was one of the best things I've ever done. Genuinely one of the best things. And
Get punched in the face.
to be honest, yeah, like
Yeah.
it
Awesome.
just, I don't know, I think it just kind of it humanizes you, but also, again, because you're on that journey with the people in your group, for most of them, they've never been punched either.
Yeah.
And it can be quite confronting if you're not aggressive. Yeah, and I remember the first time going, "Oh my God, are you okay?" You know, you smack someone when you start sparring, because you kind of start sparring like 6 weeks into it, don't you?
Yeah, about
lot
6
of it.
weeks in,
So the first 6 weeks you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Well,
The first 6 weeks we try to
Not doing-
focus very solely on the technique.
Yep.
Because I think it's very important. I mean, you get in the ring, you have a job to do. It's not just about punching people. There's actually like a method behind it.
Yeah,
so
of course.
try to
Not
get
everyone can do it.
No, that's the thing. And try to get the fundamentals down so they can understand the sport. It's like, you know, trying to get people in to play a game of football and just chucking them all on the field and giving them a ball and being like, go for it. You want to kind of give them the steps to be able to achieve what you're asking them to do. So that's why when I came on, I redid the program. Originally, I believe it was about 4 weeks of basics. And I was like, no, I believe there needs to be 6 so we can actually break it down and give it the time that it deserves. Because when you get in that ring, all you're given is, you know, in your head is those 6 weeks. We're just like, okay, I need to go back to what I've been taught and, you know, how to defend myself properly and stuff like that, which is why we redid, well, I redid the program and did 6 weeks of basics.
So why is getting in a ring and punching on with someone so attractive to the mental health and everything like that? Like you said, it was like one of the greatest things you've ever done. Like, it's very confronting going into a ring and then having to fight someone else and yourself, really.
Yeah. I think because it is a confronting thing, and a lot of people, if you were to have a conversation with someone on the street and be like, do you reckon they could do it? They'd be like, no, that's not for me. To be able to get someone in there and get them to actually realise themselves that they're capable of it kind of gives that, you know, want to come back and keep doing it, or I want to get better at sparring, or I want to land that punch, because it's all you.
It's more of a personal challenge, isn't it?
It's 100% a personal challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
You up for it?
Yeah, I think I'm down. Man, I think my weight would change halfway through the session.
I've seen people drop, 20 kilos in these programs before. It's unbelievable.
I did that at a rave once.
A little bit different, but
So you also do some refereeing.
I do. So as much as I loved the coaching side of things, I believe that, my fighting days were done. I didn't really want to, per se get back in the ring. But in the same time I did. So I remember I was going through a little bit of a difficult time. I just lost a very close friend of mine, and I kind of really lost any kind of motivation around being at the gym. I'd actually taken time off at the gym. And I was just going through on Facebook and saw that they had advertised that they were, doing a training session for officials. And I was like, oh, that will give me something to do. And my dad's a referee and official as well. So I was like, why not? And I remember walking in, and the guy that was running it was actually one of my referees back when I was fighting. And he was so excited to see me because he hadn't seen me for a long time.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're really doing this? And I was like, yeah. And I was the only female in the room. And and I remember sitting down and seeing boxing from a different perspective. Like, I'd seen it from a fighting perspective, sitting in the crowd watching it, a coaching perspective, and then to be able to see it as an official and a referee and a judge, I was like, oh, this is like another aspect that I didn't even comprehend
amazing.
To think of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I just, the way that the training was conducted, and I loved it. It kind of gave me, being back in school, but school was all about boxing.
Yeah.
So, I loved it.
That's cool, because it's like such a different angle. Like,
It-
I didn't
it
even
really
think of that as well.
is.
As
And
a
I don't
boxer,
think a
that's
lot
one
of
angle.
people have. Like, when you're growing up in a boxing family, or you're growing up as a boxer, you have that mindset as a fighter, or you have that mindset as a coach.
Yeah.
But to be able to go in and have it as a referee or an official, and a lot of them cop a lot of bad press.
Yeah.
That the fight's fixed because
Yeah.
the ref fixed
Refs
it,
always
or
get the
short.
short.
And it's not. It gave me an appreciation for what they do and how they're trained.
Has it changed how you would coach boxing as well now?
Definitely. I think,
And how you would box it if you were to fight again, if your wrist was fine.
definitely, because I don't believe that a lot of gyms in general actually understand how boxing is scored, or the rules and the regulations of boxing. So as a referee, when I'm in there, or when I'm a judge scoring, you can definitely see fighters that are taught by the score and fighters that are just taught to kind of brawl. And at the end of the day, if you're boxing or brawling, a boxer's always going to win.
Yeah.
So you can
In
definitely
points, not in the street.
Exactly, in points. Well, you never know. You never know in the street.
Yeah.
But so you can definitely see it. And I think it makes for a better boxer. It makes for a better coach. It gets that mental aspect in there as well. If you know what you're supposed to be doing rather than I just want you to go and hit them. Like, no, this is what I need you to do. Because at the end of the day, if you get two aggressive fighters, one person's going to be better than the other. If you get a defensive fighter and a defensive fighter, one's going to be better than the other. Someone needs to change it up to score points. And scoring points isn't all about just, a punch. There's a lot more to it.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely. I mean, it helped me bring in I actually have a session where I actually sit all the fighters down and take them through, how the fight is scored and,
Was that ever done for you?
Never.
See, that's awesome.
Never once.
I didn't. It's funny. I remember that session when we did it, and I didn't realise. Like genuinely, I've
got no idea. I just thought you just bashed a bloke.
Well, that was it, and I was like, so we're going for points. I thought it was, and then I remember you sitting there talking us through it, and it was, anything past the ear doesn't get scored, and it was all kind of, front and centre, and I went, yeah, that completely makes sense. But I'd never thought of it.
Yeah.
See, I thought it was just your aim of the game is to knock that person out.
And like that's the thing. Like a lot of people believe, and it used to be like that back when I had my first fight, and it was the 12 points to 1 system. It was very much just individual punches that were scored. But now there's a criteria that boxers have to meet, and it's a 3-step criteria, which is quality punches on the target zone. So every fighter has a target zone on them, which punches need to land clearly. Competitiveness and. Totally forgot what I was going to say now.
That's all right. I feel like I've got a target zone on my back at work sometimes.
That's the number one. So competitiveness and, things like being competitive in the ring. So like I was saying before, if you've got a defensive fighter and a defensive fighter, someone needs to be competitive. If you've got two defensive fighters, then someone needs to change it up to be able to score points. Things like that, being able to educate fighters and being educated as myself, it just helps.
So when you're in the ring watching the fight go on, do you look down at someone throwing a punch and go, idiot?
So for the first few times that I was reffing, because I definitely still had that that fighter's mindset. There's a system that we use if a fighter is being hit too strongly on especially an amateur fighter, if they've been hit too hard, or you've seen the neck go back, or you see them, kind of stressing a little bit. So to give them an 8 count, which is, you stop the fight, you stand in front of the fighter, you're checking them as you count to 8, and then you make the decision if they can continue. I remember my first few rounds reffing, coming from a fighter's mindset, you see a punch and you're just like, I could have handled that. Like that's all right. And then I remember getting out, my supervisor being like, no, that should have been an 8 count. Really? So it took a little while to be able to, again, change that perspective from a fighter, which definitely helped me, because I remember being able to, being in the crowd watching and seeing a hit happen, and then the ref getting in and giving an 8 count and being like, oh, that was nothing. But at the end of the day, the ref has a duty of care to both fighters, especially, when they're young. They have a whole career ahead of them. If they're getting hit hard or they're not composed or they're stressing out, it's not worth them going through the punishment. Stop the fight, take the loss, get back to the gym, train and come back.
Yeah.
So it took me a couple of times to, as much as I knew that, to kind of then adapt it into an official, and now I can see it from a different perspective where I'm like, I have a duty of care to take care of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when does the towel get thrown in? I saw a fight where it was just like these blokes were like punching on, and a towel just got thrown in. I'm like, and they're called the fight. I'm like,
so the coaches can, if they believe that their fighters, out of their depths. A few coaches will actually try to do it before the ref intervenes, because say if I was to come in and give a third 8 count, then the fight would technically be ruled a knockout, which then in New South Wales they have a rule where they can't fight for 30 days. So some of the refs will the coaches will try to beat that by throwing the towel in, and it's called abandonment. So technically speaking, it's not ruled as a knockout, which then means they could fight the next weekend if they wanted to.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of coaches will throw it if they feel like their fighters aren't listening. That's something that I would do back with corporate fighters. I didn't believe that, charity boxing warranted any knockouts. So if I ever believed that a fighter was going too hard or they weren't listening or they were just, being too aggressive, I'd throw the towel in.
Yeah.
Because that's not what charity boxing is about. If that's what people wanted to do, they could go to the rough and tough gym, and do that and train to knock people out. But that's not whatever was
Where's that
corporate
gym?
fighter about. No. There's a lot of them around.
You wouldn't last 10 seconds.
100%. That would be a record for me.
Exactly. What's you mentioned the third 8 count. Why would you give an 8 count?
So an 8 count is given if a fighter is hit too hard. So what will happen is as a judge or a referee in the ring, you're looking at the space between the two fighters. So it's very predominant when a fighter's been hit hard, when you see their head go back or you see them crumple. In amateur boxing, there's no point on letting them suffer past that. Like we don't want amateurs to be knocked out or hurt. So you get in there to give them time to compose themselves and just check on them. Because, boxing is a contact sport and there have been, sad instances where, people have been, hurt or, people go on to end up having, lifelong issues. And as a referee, you have that duty of care. So you're just there. I don't care who wins or loses as a referee. I really don't. And as a judge watching, I don't care. I just want to make sure both fighters are safe.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So on that as well, so when you're refereeing, I mean, you're obviously refereeing two boxers, whether male or female, they're boxers. Yep. They're amped up, they're ready to go, to knock someone out. What's your kind of prep as a ref? Because again, you're quite a petite lady. You got a big smile on your face all the time. How do you kind of get Jemma the ref ready to go?
Yeah,
is there like an intimidation tactic? Because again, you're a female referee as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's an intimidation thing. I think I've been very lucky to be able to be trained by the best. Like I've been able to go down to the Australian Institute of Sport and, train with the best officials in the world. And I've had some really great opportunities. I've been able to train alongside the Australian team and their prep for going over to the world competition. And I don't think it's an intimidation thing. It's more of an authority figure. When I get in the ring, I'm the boss. Like what I say goes. And it's just controlling the fighters with your voice. Like I've reffed male fighters that are over 100 kilos that have tried to mouth off to me in the ring before. And then by the end of it, they're coming up to apologize with tears in their eyes. It's like, you've got to be that authority figure and put your foot down, because at the end of the day, I'm there to do a job and I'm not going to take anyone, disrespecting that. Yeah.
So do you start off tough?
Well, I mean, there's checks that you have to do. The rule of being a referee in the ring is you're the first one in and you're the last to leave. So you get in the ring first and none of the boxers are allowed in until you show that they can come in. And when they come in, you go over to check them. You make sure their head guards on, the mouth guards in. You make sure that they're tucked in. Got to make sure the boys have a groin guard on. Make sure that, the Velcro is done. And, I wish the coach luck. And it's usually within that stage you can kind of see who's going to be an issue and who's not. I mean, there's sometimes I'll go over and check a fighter and they're just so hyped up. And they just have the look of just like they're going to kill the guy on the other ring. And then you kind of know at that stage going into the center before you give the instructions that this fight might be a little bit intense. So you can kind of start to adapt to that throughout it. So you may, there's a thing called soft cautions as a ref where you can talk to the fighter as they're going through it. So if some person's being aggressive, that's not following through to the rules, then I have every right to stop the fight, caution the fighter. Because at the end of the day, I can take points away. So if they're not listening to what I'm saying, because, I've had fighters that try to do Superman punches or, try to tackle their opponent. No, okay. Unfortunately.
What's a Superman punch?
So the Superman punch, where you kind of, jump up and your feet come off the ground. And it's like,
so your feet have to be on the ground when punching?
Both boxers' feet have to be on the ground for the duration of the fight.
I was just thinking of MMA.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people try to tackle people, pushing, shoving, elbows. Like I've seen it all. And the more it happens, you kind of get adapted to it and you know how to control the situation. So I can't remember the last instance where I've had, someone either disrespect me in the ring or, listen to my instructions, because I'm reffing quite a lot before all the COVID stuff happened, nearly every weekend. So, and for majority of the time, I'm the only female ref. So, yeah.
Are there many female refs in Australia?
I mean, there are a few around, but not many. I mean, for majority of the time, like I'm actually quite lucky that Boxing Australia actually sends me around the nation a lot. A lot of time in South Australia. I was up in Queensland not so long ago, repping tournaments and stuff like that. And for majority of the time, I think apart from South Australia has a very strong female presence, which is absolutely amazing. I'd say like 80% of their officials are female, which is unbelievable to see. But for most of the other states, it's a rare occurrence. They are there and they are present, but definitely outnumbered by the males.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So you've recently left corporate photo. What's
Yes.
next for Coach Jemma?
So at the moment,
Got to trademark that first of all.
Coach Jemma hashtag. At the moment, I'm very much enjoying studying the diploma of counselling.
Yeah.
I have been approached by a few people about opening gyms or looking into opening one. I definitely think that's something that I'd love to look into. I do believe that I will probably not look at reincorporating a program like Corporate Fighter. I think it's great where it is and it can stay. I think I'd look more so at the progression of fighters and kind of seeing them past that first fight and, kind of building that ongoing fight family, which is what I loved boxing growing up. Like I'm still in contact with a lot of people that I fought with or, trained with. Like me and Luke have known each other for a very long time and I train with him most times through the week. And you can't build that. Like that comes from, the foundation that you walk into and that's what I want for people. Because sometimes I know I've had days where I've struggled and Luke's been like, come and train. I'm like, that's all I needed or vice versa and stuff like that. So to be able to give people not just a training opportunity, but a support system, an ongoing one is something that I definitely want to look at giving people. So, yeah.
Nice.
It's almost like a gym/life coach.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why I wanted to get into counselling because as much as I thought coaching, I loved coaching and helping people, that I'm also very aware of like the mental health situation with a lot of people and stuff like that. I mean, in my time coaching, I've had that many conversations with people where I've seen they're struggling and being able to not fix the problem, but be able to give them the realization that they're able to move past it. And I think a lot of people need to do that. I think a lot of people have the misconception with mental health that it's going to get fixed. Mental health isn't something that you can fix overnight. It's something that needs to be worked through, but it needs to be worked through by the individual. So that's why I think this counselling course and, coaching and looking at opening a gym is something that will all tie in very well together because I don't think it's been done before. I think it's a lot of people focus on the physical health and then touch on the mental health, but to have a strong point on both is something that I think people need.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I'll
Yeah.
sign up straight away.
Well, I think we kind of touched on it at the start. I mean, how important would you say fitness, exercise is to your mental health?
I think it's incredibly important. I mean, I've had times, and I like to think that I am a very, a physical person. I like to get up and I work out, and I have days, and especially with all of this social distancing thing where I have not had it in me to do. And then I finally get myself up, and even if it's just a walk around the block, I feel a million times better just by getting outside, getting away from devices and screens and things like that. And it just gives myself a new perspective. And I mean, I don't see anything else that's being able to achieve that. Like I don't feel any better because I've sat down and watched a TV show. Like I don't feel any better because, I've, played a game on my phone. Like I don't feel any kind of sense of I did something good today.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that's why it's so important. I don't think people need to be going out and, running marathons and stuff like that. I just think it needs baby steps.
Yeah.
And it gives you that, okay, I did that today, sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the future for boxing for you, you've obviously worn all the hats. I mean, is it something where you want to get more women into boxing? Is there changes in boxing that you want to try and, I don't know, kind of fly the flag of?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could ever not have anything to do with boxing now. I mean, it's been my life since I was 16. And I've gone through the fighter, I've gone through coach. I'm very much loving my life as a referee and official. I would love to one day be at the Olympic game as an official. That's definitely on the cards. I was actually looking at doing my 3-star qualification, but I ended up having a little bit of an accident where I knocked myself out and cut my head open and ended up with 4 stitches.
Did you punch yourself?
No, I actually
I visualised that.
I wish I was that cool, but no, I passed out and hit my head on the fridge door and sliced it open. I remember being on the tiles of the floor and being like, oh, what happened? I don't remember. I've got to go to the gym, and walked out the door, and didn't take me long before I realised I was actually bleeding and had to come back in, and turns out I was having a seizure. So I ended up in hospital.
What?
Yeah, I ended up in hospital for a long time after it. And I remember calling my supervisor I was on morphine and endone and all the painkillers they could give me. And I'll be like, I'll be there tomorrow. Don't worry. I'll do it. And then, and then I had to call him 24 hours later and be like, so I'm still in hospital and I've got a lot of tests that I need to do. I missed my opportunity to get the highest qualification you can get in Australia, which is your 3-star. And then I was looking at doing it again this year. And then COVID happened.
Far out.
So
Can't catch a break.
let's go for next year.
It's on the list.
So it is definitely on the list. And I think being able to travel as a female with Boxing Australia as an official and talk to other females in boxing and kind of give them the perspective that I didn't have, that this is an option for you, and they treat me so well. Like I've never felt, anything less than being in a female official. Like I'm always like, like we're grateful that you're here, or you're a good official, and not because I'm a female. I'm a good official because I'm a good official, which is great to feel, because I feel like with females that enter any kind of male-dominated thing, they're like, oh, you're good because you're a girl. They're like, no, you're good because you're good.
Yeah.
So
you're not ticking a quota box.
Exactly.
You're there because your
I've
skills
earned
to be there.
I've earned to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
there. So, and they've given me so many great opportunities and things like that. So to be able to go further with them with those opportunities that they give me is definitely something that I want to do. And then look at opening my own place and try to get more females on board and, inspire them to inspire others. And because I think that's what happens. I was like, you can watch as many TV ads as you want or influencers on Instagram. I was like, you need to be in there and doing it yourself and meet the person, have a conversation with them and stuff like that. And that's how it happens. That's how it should happen. So, yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, look, that sounds very, very exciting. Coach Jemma, how can people get in contact with you? I mean, you are obviously a fountain of knowledge around the sport, but I also think just around kind of general, life. You're pretty well seasoned and well versed in most things. How do people get in contact?
I mean, I'm always open to talk to anyone that needs it or needs a little point of, direction in their life. So, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, hit me up. I'm happy to have a conversation. Sometimes people need it. So
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time on Lifestyle
No, thank
Pirates.
you.
Great to see you.
Thanks,
Look
guys.
forward to
worries.
having a punch soon.
Take care.
Bye.